front of the Doshitan or turn and face your computer screen. Tonight, I will be giving a Dharma talk. SokukoJi has asked me to do this. He is in Illinois and going to be meeting with a neurologist to look at or see if he can find any relief from his skin pain. I don't know how many of you know that he really struggles with what he has been calling peripheral neuropathy, but he just met a neurologist and that's who he's meeting with today. But over the phone, they said, you do not have peripheral neuropathy. It is something that we call fire skin. But they wanted to do a physical exam to make sure that that might be the diagnosis and then consider what some of his options might be. So he's really looking forward to some relief. So tonight, SokukoJi has asked that I talk about addiction. And I think most of you know, but some of you may not, that I am a counselor, a therapist, and I have specialized training in addiction. And I've worked with supporting people who have been struggling with addiction or working with addiction or exploring their relationship to substances and or habits, anything that we are addicted to. So the very first thing is like, what is addiction? Because that's such a broad topic, and can we apply it generally? Usually addiction is considered something to do with drugs or alcohol. But if you look at addiction and what it's defined as, even psychologically or in Buddhist tradition, it is a loss of freedom. There's a loss of ability to have agency in some way. So for me, I can say that I can see various thought patterns, various habits that I am see myself do, and I will watch myself do with my Buddhist training for awareness and observing. I can watch myself do and make certain comments or make do some certain habits that are repetitive. And do I have agency if I watch myself do these over and over again with a desire to stop, with some potential impact on relationships or work opportunities? No legal issues that I'm aware of. And I remember with the fourth, there's like 4 different quadrants to addiction. So I think SokukoJi's intent was for me to talk about how can counseling and our Buddhist practice of meditation work together. And with clients that come to me, it's always incredibly subjective. It's always individually one-on-one. If someone comes and they're looking for immediate relief and can point to areas that they're really concerned about, it's affecting relationships, it's affecting their work, they want immediate relief, we might go into the counseling area before or in conjunction with anything in the meditation area. Most people that are coming into therapy are not looking for meditation as the solution. And it's usually only until later that you can even propose that. And I know Shodo has had an example of his own personal experience where meditation was the answer pretty early in treatment, possibly. Am I calling you out? Sorry about that. So counseling can help us observe when we have a third party that can ask questions to help us maybe consider things that we weren't able or willing to look at ourselves. So it's not uncommon for someone to come into counseling and really want to look at something, but not want to look at something. And that could easily be the relationship to alcohol or drugs, but usually it's something to do with a relationship. And the alcohol or drugs are a way of coping. So I guess I want to go back to what is addiction. The addiction spectrum is just huge. It can be, slight symptoms all the way to severe symptoms. It can be mental, emotional, it can be physical. It can be all of those in one way or the other. And so, I don't know, I'm going to try to figure out how to not say this over and over and over again, but it is just like SokukoJi says, it's situational. It is so subjective. It is individual. It is whatever we want to, when we show up in a therapist office or when we show up in a meditation hall, what is it that we want to really look at? What can we look at? And can we do it gently, but at the same time, do it with intention? So when someone is coming for and wanting to look at addiction, and do you go the counseling route or do you go the meditation route? There will be some times when we might offer kind of a spectrum of approaches. One can be strict, let's look at our thoughts and behaviors and emotions from a very clinical perspective. One can be, let's get familiar with our bodies and really get a sense as to how this is impacting, where this is impacting emotionally, physically. So reconnect somebody to their bodies. It can be, do you want to work with this fundamentally? And by fundamentally, I'm thinking of, in the Buddhist tradition, we're looking at a way to work with our minds, our habits, our emotions. That isn't just a Band-Aid, or isn't just introducing new thoughts or changing our thoughts or changing our behaviors or changing emotions. We're looking at sitting and observing, and with awareness, and let our awareness drive where we need to go. So in some ways, it's maybe a matter of control. How much control does someone need at the beginning? And give them many different ways to look at their addiction, or we want to look at this more fundamentally. So I can see that I am starting to go in circles. I would very much appreciate questions. Shodo?
Shodo, I think you, at least I saw that you were talking the one half of it where someone comes for counseling and maybe you offer them meditation, but I feel like it's gone the other way too, where someone's come here for meditation and they've ended up in front of you as a counselor. How does that show up?
I wish there was like one answer to that. It can be that SokukoJi makes that suggestion and that sounds good to them to have one conversation. And it could be one conversation so that they can explore what that might look like, what it might feel like to be in conversation with me or another therapist. But there's no one way. It can be that SokukoJi strongly encourages someone It could be that that person just, yeah, that sounds good. That sounds like a way I want to work with this. It could be that someone's coming in and they, into the door here in the meditation hall, and they want to hit the ground running and want to do a lot of work. And that might be just something that they're offered and they're interested in. Other questions on,
Hogan bowing. What changes a behavior?
so we can maybe temporarily change behavior, or we can fundamentally change behavior. And, you know, with meditation, there's no guarantee that a behavior might change. It might be that it's no longer a concern to you. So from counseling, psychological perspective, it could be looking at your thoughts or your emotions attached to that behavior. It might be looking at the beliefs that engage that behavior. That would be one way. Psychology has maybe not hundreds, but a lot of different ways of looking at this body-mind complex. And so that could just be one way. Another way would be like family, looking at your relationships. There's just so many different ways to carve up our experience, this body-mind experience. More?
Hogan bowing. How do you see meditation? How does meditation work in changing behaviors that may have a great deal of suffering involved with them?
Does meditation work? So initially, it might be that you're just paying attention to something, like if you're saying a behavior, you're paying attention to a behavior. And by looking at it more closely, you can see the thoughts or the emotions that are connected to that. You can see how it feels. You can look at the discomfort. You can look at the results. So all that awareness that comes around, either through psychology or with meditation, it's a, like, you know, I'm quoting SokukoJi, it's about awareness. It's about bringing things into the light of day. From a counseling perspective, it's by not looking away from a meditation perspective. Does that actually guarantee results? Does that end up with results? I think many of us can name something that we know that if we once we meditated, we can see that actual behaviors changed. Ones that we wanted to have changed. But we also know that it's not about the changing necessarily with meditation. It's about seeing it, observing the behavior, and through that observation, letting whatever happens happen. So it's in some ways, you know, you could say releasing our grip. So with addiction, so much about this is about the grasping, holding on, attaching. That's that loss of freedom. We're holding on to a behavior, we're holding on to a substance, and it, by observing it and over time, and getting to know it on a lot of many different levels, maybe not intentionally, just whatever shows up, we eventually, it loosens. But what loosens? Does the behavior actually change? Not necessarily. It might be just our grasping at it, our strong desire to let it go, to stop it, or it can be the actual behavior itself. Shoto?
Shadow bowing, does it look to you more or less that addiction is pointing at the same thing as the concept of grasping, or is there something more going on there? Bowing.
There's definitely the grasping and the attaching to it. So are grasping and attaching the same thing? Seems like attaching has more of a time element to it. But I think also when you think of biological addiction, especially one that is reinforced emotionally, socially, that it seems like there's, I don't know, different strengths that might be associated with an addiction versus I think of an example of just grasping. I was Tenzo tonight, and so I like to have things done early. So in some ways that's exercising some control, and for me that could involve some grasping, because I don't like to let things go to the last minute. Is that the same thing as an addiction? Is that repetitive? Is that harming anyone? Is that like harming myself? Does that reduce my pleasure? Yes and no.
Shadow bowing, could we look at grasping at a self as an addiction? Does it meet the same criteria or definition? Bowing.
That could be what we would look at as kind of the core. ShokukoJi was using a different word, I think, earlier today. But when we look at addiction and what is driving our grasping or attaching, we're looking at usually a need for safety in some way. So ask your question again. I've lost my train of thought.
Shadow bowing. In particular, you were just saying how like there might be like a social or an emotional like conditioning or support, and like it looked to me like you could define someone getting their pride poked in a similar way. There's an emotional component. And it sounded to me like you were defining both situations, and I was wondering if that's the case, and if we can go into that at all.
Is that attachment to an identity, attachment to a self? Is that a primal addiction, primary addiction, core addiction? That there's a where I was going with my answer, which isn't quite getting to your what you're looking for, is the polyvagal theory, which goes back to biologically, we are from organisms where all the sense organs were on the skin. And so then the eyes and ears and everything developed from this skin organ that was so sensitive, all these nerves. And it was all about safety. If you can imagine, if you were, I don't know if it was necessarily an amoeba, but some sort of very simple animal trying to survive and not getting eaten and finding food. So just very primal needs. And then you add on this idea that as we as humans think we're an individual, that there is not only the need for safety, but there's also this need for, and there's some sort of belief, is it more of a core belief that we are a solid person, a solid entity? So I'm getting there, but I need more help. Anybody else? Shoto, you got anything more for me? I'm working on it. I think it's an excellent question.
Shadow bowing. In an addiction, can you see what, like a blind spot or something in a client, or I don't know if that's the word. Can you see where they're covering something up? Like pretty blatantly. I'm wondering if that's similar to like Sokusan with a student. Like, do you see something like that going?
Sometimes, but 99% of the time, it's not it. So it's interesting. What that person is looking for and needing, only they know. And I love the way that Sokuzan doesn't share what he thinks or what he sees. Because, and I'm not, Sokuzan can see what I can't. But from my own personal experience, what I have seen and what I think the person in front of me needs to see is not it. It's amazing that if you're just in conversation, you're just asking the questions, what the person will come up with. And it has surprised me every time. I don't know if that gets to your question, but I don't think your original question, but anybody else help us with this?
Not seeing you bowing. This might be a little bit of a different direction, but my question is, how do counseling and meditation relate to like the concept of stability? I feel like in my experience, meditation, looking at things that are uncomfortable to look at can be destabilizing, but my impression of counseling is that maybe you're trying to work towards stability.
So I would see what the client is wanting. Not all clients, I think, want stability. Some may need it, and so you present both. But yes, meditation it can be destabilizing. You can offer stabilization in a variety of ways. You can look at hard stuff, and asking tough questions of people has actually been stabilizing, in my experience. That's exactly what they wanted to do. They wanted to look at it. They didn't really want to look at it, but they really wanted to look at it. And the relief that comes can be crazy. So traditionally, I think psychology, counseling is, can offer stabilization. But again, it's not, I wouldn't, I don't know. What do you call that? Where I would not be an automatic for me. I haven't added any new clients, but I just added a client within the last, I don't know, 6 months ago, I think it was. And the whole point for that person was to actually look at something all their lives, they had never admitted, and they wanted somebody that would help them ask that tough question, and that was stabilizing for them. Does that make sense?
One more question, not seeing you bowing. How or the relating to asking the questions and developing a therapeutic relationship, And then looking at like the therapeutic relationship, and maybe in contrast to relationship to Sangha or teacher, how does the relationship and the questioning quality help us to see, know self and other?
Again, very situational. That's an excellent question. And so if you have a partner that is wanting to go in that direction, for me, I would reflect on your question for myself. How does working in counseling and and on the cushion help me see no self? Up initially is just the fixity. If you can see the fixity in someone else, it might help me see the fixity in myself. It seems like there's many other ways to answer that question. And are coming to me right now. Do you have another question? Counselor to counselor?
Not right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and bowing. Is meditation looking at delusion and illusion while counseling is working within the illusion? Bowing.
Can you say your question again?
Elena bowing. I'm wondering if in meditation we're training to see how this is an illusion, but then when we're working with a counselor, it's like we're learning how to cope within the illusion, within the rules of the game. Bowing.
So we're kind of flipping roles, all right? So that's why I needed you to answer that again. So working with a counselor, you could actually do both. So depending on if your counselor is part of a Buddhist tradition or not, you can be looking at, what do you want to accomplish relatively, and what do you want to accomplish fundamentally? You could actually have a dual track going. Traditionally, counseling would definitely be all about the relative and being more immediate in addressing whatever the issues are. And again, it's so client specific, whatever their goals are. Mazuku.
Zuckervine, you just kind of described, I feel like phrases like working with something fundamentally get contrasted with something like therapy. And you described the therapeutic side as working with the relative and more immediate, just not what is working with something fundamentally, particularly in what you're in the area you're describing,
I
like
think
addiction.
Not necessarily, but it could be just more low and observing and not necessarily quickly introducing fixes. So it could be that there's this X problem and you could make a change or suggest a change or work with a particular change to fix the immediate issue. Or you could continue to look at it for a period of time. So it's, kind of like shikantaza, but in a counseling session. Let's look at it again. Let's look at it from this perspective. Let's look at it from this perspective. Let's look at it from this perspective. Until it seems like there's an answer that arises for the client. Does that answer your question?
Zuckervine, yeah, at the beginning of your talk, you used the word working with something fundamentally a couple of times, and it's not unusual to hear it that way, but for some reason, the association, that word, it struck me because that word's often used with religion, fundamental religion,
Mhm.
fundamentalist religion. So I just suddenly felt like I had no idea what we really mean by that phrase. So maybe I'll just ask it again. What do you mean by fundamentally?
At the core, going to the core of the issue rather than putting a Band-Aid on it. So not just a quick fix. Mm, Be wonderful to have an example here.
I have one.
Yeah.
Mazuka bowing, I'm guessing you've had clients that are in some kind of toxic situation. You know, maybe their living situation or something that it's just causing them a lot of difficulty. I think that's the example that's kind of floating in my mind when I think relative versus fundamental. I mean, that might just be the root of the issue. So would you just encourage them, oh, just stay in that toxic situation and look at it longer? Like, that's how it's like showing up to me, where the relative would be like, get the heck out of that situation. So maybe in that instance, what would it mean to look at something fundamentally or get to the core of something?
Well, again, it'd be the client's choices, but you would present safety, encourage that if they needed encouragement. But if they were not necessarily needing encouragement, you know, again, it's just so particular client related. So if we had a client that was at 150% agency and was coming for help making a decision about whether to stay or leave, depending, you know, kids are here, you know, all the different issues that could be involved in something like that. And just see if that's the direction they wanted to go in. But to work fundamentally with something like that, it might be. Because I just don't see someone in that kind of a situation wanting to kind of reflect on, you know, what they want to get out of life or whatever, you know. I guess I can't jump to that, a fundamental fix in that particular situation.
Mazuka bowing, can anybody miss an opportunity to see something more clearly by leaving some kind of toxic situation?
Mhm. Yeah. So that would be an example, then maybe that if that is something, I just haven't had an experience where someone's wanting to do anything fundamentally in that situation. So I think that's why I'm having such a hard time looking at that.
Mazuka bowing, maybe just to ask it differently, my question's partly coming out of the contrast between a therapeutic situation and the meditation practice or a Buddhist context is, would you be more likely to encourage a fellow Sangha member who's not your client to stay with a toxic situation than you would a client? I'm just wondering where that distinction between looking at something from every angle and a faster, more relative fix, where that comes from.
Totally from the client. And so it would be my sensitivity in terms of to point out what the possibilities are. But, yeah, I would never say that, oh, you've got a relative fix and a fundamental fix, which path you want to go on. One example is I have a client that I've had for 7, 8, 9 years. And there's literally no desire, interest. He knows I'm a monk, I'm a meditator. But there is just absolutely no interest, and never have I suggested you should try mindfulness. Because that's just not. And I mean, he's definitely been part of a group that I've led where he's practiced it, been exposed to it. Never would I suggest a fundamental fix in that direction for him. It might be that it's through conversation for him, or being accompanying him. That might be the fundamental fix for him. I don't know.
Was it good bowing? It sounds like in your therapy practice, you're keyed into trying to understand, meeting the client with what their goals are or what they want. Is there a difference in relating to Sangha?
Yeah, I think so. I think in Sangha, it is not a contractual relationship. It's not one where there's an intention to provide any support other than listening. Like there's no professional information that somebody's asking me for, and I'm certainly not going to offer that. Unless the situation showed up that that felt like the right thing to do, and then I would say, no, I could answer this way, but maybe you don't want to hear that. I don't know. That hasn't happened to me yet.
Was it good bowing? So is the main difference kind of a permission-like difference?
The intent, maybe. Intent for the two people to come together. Thank you. Elena.
Bowing. In 12-step programs, there's a lot of obeying what your sponsor says, and there's a lot of speed bumps or controls that we put in place to stop you from going down the same path. And SokukoJi often talks about don't obey, we don't control anything. So what is the danger of trying to do a quick fix and obeying and using these controls, bowing?
I think it might in some ways get to what Mizuko was asking. There's a graduated approach. So initially, someone might be wanting the quick fix, and so obeying and speed bumps are bumpers, and mantras or what breathing exercises, something very concrete might be what is needed to surf an urge, for example. But eventually, they may be, or maybe initially, or right away, open to the idea that it's not about obeying, it's about observing. It's about seeing the grasping, seeing the urge, not about putting in a fix so that the urge doesn't even present itself. Because I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I'm going to experience that urge. It's, again, totally situational. If you have a biological addiction, you may need some very concrete spaces. That's why there are rehabs. Or AA. And that may be perfect for some individuals. And they never get to explore, never want to explore, aren't interested in exploring something beyond. All right, I'm always going to go to AA. You know, if you're familiar at all with AA, there are people that have gone there for 20 years. That is their thing. That's what, you know, and some people might say that they've changed one addiction to another addiction, but it's working for them. Whatever's happening there, is it another addiction? Doesn't matter. For them, it's working, giving them quality of life.
Aleda Bowing, do we risk being able to work with something fundamentally if we're immediately putting in controls and obeying and quick fixes?
It's totally situational again. Not necessarily. It may be that those quick fixes are necessary to get to a place where the next, step could be looked at.
Thank you.
That's me.
Natsumi Bowing, what is the freedom that is lost in the definition that you gave of loss of freedom?
Choice. Maybe it depends again on the situation, but someone could be losing work options, relationships, the ability to move meet their own needs or desires, because they're locked down on a particular thing or pattern or belief. So yeah, again, it would be so situational. Trying to think of an example. One that's coming to me right now is someone who is in chronic pain and has had multiple surgeries, and many of those surgeries have failed. They cannot walk. They can barely sit up. And yet I wonder what is really limiting them. You know, there's a lot of physical pain, a lot of physical limitations. But I think there could be something else there that is actually the limitation.
Natsumi Bowing, it seems like the focus of counseling is surrounding an individual and their like immediate relationships or milieu. How do you work within that while also looking at the Buddhist like teaching and concept of dependent origination, where there might be a wider like societal net or something that's failing that's showing up in the individual?
That's very much a social work ideal, looking at the environment, not necessarily blaming the individual or making it just the individual's issue. I don't know. For me personally, I can answer that, but for a client, I think that comes through in acknowledging everything that's impinging on that particular client. So that would, I think, for me, when I hear that, I don't know, you're not social work, you're psychology, right?
I'm speech therapist.
Okay, you went down to psychology and social work, we kind of get that beaten into us, that really look at the environmental impact. Was there more to your question than that? environmental impact versus the individual?
I guess I was just wondering, when you're working with a client, only the individual is the one that's in front of you that you're sort of interfacing with, and I was kind of wondering like how to include the dependent origination and the bigger picture within that one-on-one interaction.
Okay, good question. I mean, it seemed like an appropriate topic to bring up. I would bring it up with that particular client, but otherwise, it's going to be stay here. And what would you call that when you're not, I don't believe in diagnosing. I don't believe that you can, narrow things down to this particular diagnosis. Everything's just such a mishmash. So the same thing, you wouldn't, there's a term there, where you don't blame the client, basically. So, you can hold that here, you can hold the bigger picture here in how you're relating to that client. The Buddhist picture. Inla,
In Long Valley. A moment ago, when you were speaking about the 12-step program, and you talked about replacing one addiction with another, you said, but it works for them. Is that ever the case on the spiritual path? That an addiction could work for you?
mhm. Yes,
You said one.
you can't say always for any, and with that AA, I don't say that somebody's going to AA, they're addicted to AA. And even if they've gone there for 20 years, I don't think, but there can be some of that happening. So again, with your question, say your question again.
Well, I'm curious if the idea of an addiction, even if it's just being used loosely in that sense, if the idea that it could be working for you. When you said that, I thought, okay, that makes sense in a mundane path, but it seems like on the spiritual path, just the very idea of an addiction would be problematic, or the idea of something working for you if it has an addictive quality. So maybe not as an addiction, strictly speaking, but say a habit, say a practice habit that becomes a rut that seems to be working for you. Is it actually in the spiritual path? Could it be counterproductive, maybe? Trying to go into that area.
Yeah, I often wonder that, like with some of my practices, that am I doing this because it's a habit, or am I doing it because this is that it means something? Is that still a habit? Is there awareness around that? And I've heard SokukoJi answer that question not quite a bit, but I've heard him answer it multiple times, that it's about awareness. So, yeah, I think anything can be, but nothing is permanent. Something will always change. So, help me go into that further.
In Long Valley, this might take us away from that, but I just appeared as practitioners. Does the practice make us more susceptible to any kind of addiction or any kinds of addictions?
I think so. I think we can find a practice that really feels comfortable and we want to do it, and or we feel real comfortable about the forms. We're going to show up for all forms, or always the morning form, or whatever. But I still, having seen that in myself and in others here over the years, it doesn't last. So I think as long as we're showing up with the intention to look, somehow awareness comes to the fore, but not always. No. Very good area. Any more that you can go in there?
I have to think about it, I'm sorry.
So bowing, does it look like there is a point, or to phrase it that way, where you have to choose one or the other, like you have to finish your spiritual path at the expense of the counseling or something like that?
No. Mhm. Again, it's just so situational. There can be events that show up in life that or something that you've uncovered on the cushion that you need to go in deeper, and you're looking for a conversation partner to be more intentional about it. And you may have a teacher that you can do that with, but you may not. You may want to have kind of a weekly, looking at it weekly. Then you're going to want to have a counselor. Wanted to go into another section of that, but I can't. Hold up.
So knowing to use that idea that both of these, I think you brought it up, that both the spiritual and the counseling, or the, I don't remember how you set it up, they're working with that loss of freedom. And I played around with that a little bit, and it seems like that could even be different, where from the mundane perspective, the loss of freedom is the loss of the apparent individual, but the loss of freedom from the spiritual path might be the exact opposite of that, where you're challenging that.
Mhm.
So how could those work together?
Awareness. And hopefully a good conversation partner, and somebody who's willing to be confused with you, looking at both of those. Right. Jasheen, did you need a question answered? Did you want to make your contribution?
Well, my question is about the term you used, working fundamentally, and look at something versus the conventional way of counseling. And I'm wondering, I think you said that you have never actually had a client who would find the core. You said working fundamentally is to find the core. And I think you said that you've never had a client who found the core. I'm wondering, since I think 2 days ago, we were talking during the group study, we were talking about the practice being like that, removing the layers of the onions and not to be able ever to find the core, whether it is something which would be even possible in the case of counseling process. Bound.
There's a lot there, Jasheen. I would want to say that I have definitely worked with people who are wanting to work on their identity, wanting to see their identity, wanting to work on what we would say fundamentally. But is it, I guess, what is your other question there? Can we ever get to a core? Is that your question? Can we ever get to the core?
Dishinbowing, yes, whether we can ever find the core of addiction in the process of counseling. Since what I understood a couple of days ago, that it's impossible to do it during the meditation practice, ongoing meditation practice. Bowing.
I don't know, I think in one way, there's no way we can see the core without seeing fundamentally what this actually is. But to get to the kind of the root of a particular addiction for a particular person, yes, I think that is possible. Not to say that there's not more work that can be done, but for someone to be heard or to actually look where they need to look and see what they need to see, I think in terms of a particular addiction, that is possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We'll stand and dedicate the mirror.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-ho san shi shifu, shi-son lu-sa mo-ko-sa, mo-ko-ho-ja. The 10 directions, the 3 times, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita,